before I forget, so I record it. Okay.
We have a happy bunch.
We have a happy bunch. It's on summer mode.
And it's not fair because the people at home can't chat at will.
Oh, they chat to each other.
I know.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's like I said, we've got a big crowd here. So, prayers first. I was thinking yesterday when we were setting, just in our own body of that get together, we have so many people with chronic health issues, and they weigh on them and their family members. And I was also listening to a podcast this week while I was driving, and the guy that was being interviewed was talking about a time when he was at his darkest hour, if you would. And he said he came to a point where he didn't know what to pray. And he said, I finally decided the best prayer was, can I feel your presence? And I thought, for those who live with chronic issues and they don't know what the answers are going to be, for us to pray that they can feel God's presence. Amen. And so I was thinking of Kay and Kelly and Cindy and our daughter Julie and Cheryl and others that have chosen right now not to be mentioned at this time. And anyhow, that's what I was thinking.
I will mention, I got a text this week, and it's a number that I don't have in my contacts. I don't know who it was. And it said something to the effect, are you free to this evening? Are you free to talk? And I don't know who it is. And they do scam things like that, where if you text back. So if it was one of you, text me your name if you send me something like that, because usually it's not safe to even answer back when you don't know who it is. God, this prayer for us to feel your presence is something we all look for. We're here because we want to feel your presence. We have those among us with these chronic problems. And you know it affects all of us, but it affects them so much more and their families. And we don't have answers. Sometimes we don't recognize the answers. We don't see the answer until down the road, but it's difficult. And we do ask for all of these, the ones we mentioned, the ones who don't want to be mentioned yet. The thing we look for to see, to feel your presence. You tell us that if we seek, we'll find. Well, that's what we seek. As we dig into your word, we seek your presence. We look for ways that we can better find you when these times come to us. Grant us that. Amen.
This week we are in week 17 of Genesis, and where we left off last time, Isaac, which was Abraham and Sarah's son, had been deceived by his wife and his second youngest son to give his second youngest son, Jacob, his blessing. But there was also the understanding at the end of last week that Isaac, figured out that's what had happened, and he wasn't mad. And, I believe what we should get out of that is Isaac realized that Jacob, his second son, was better suited to steward the covenant promise, and that Esau was not well suited to do the promise.
There were a couple of things, and I guess a lot of you have figured out one of my passions is things that either because we're taught wrong or we misunderstand, or just there's not the information is limited. things that affect our faith, things that make it difficult for people because they look at something and say, well, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't seem consistent with what I would like to believe about God. And some of you may suffer from it. I know people that I deal with through the weeks do. And this idea of Jacob being dishonest, how does God use somebody like that? And there were a couple of things I was going to mention last week, and it'll be the last of this. But when we were in Israel, there is I told you, if they can cheat you out of a shekel, they will. In the train, I mean, a nickel. It's just a way of life. But they have a saying that is, don't be a friar. And a friar is a chump, a sap. If somebody cheats you, don't come crying to me. All right, it's your fault. Don't be a chump. Don't be a friar. And that's today. This is not some ancient, tradition that they behave differently now. But the other thing is when I was little, I remember my dad. I don't even know why he told me, but when he was in the army, they have a foot locker, and nearly everything you own is in your foot locker. And he said, if someone steals from your foot locker and you left it unlocked, it's your fault. It's your fault. Is that consistent, Gene?
Yes, sir.
Don't come whine to me. You left it unlocked. And this concept that Jacob, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying a person should steal from your foot locker or cheat me out of a shekel, but the attitude is different. And we have, built up this idea that, well, that's just wrong. Well, yeah, it is just wrong. But this idea of how can it be consistent for God to use someone like that, for God to put the covenant through someone like that, you're going to see more as we go on. Why? Now, before we ended last week, Gene said something. He asked a question, and it was a very good, perceptive question. And it was about Jacob's mother. And she came from the old country. She's not, she wasn't from the beginning. She wasn't a part of this. How did she get such concern for the covenant? And my answer was, I don't see any evidence that Rebecca, when she helped Jacob steal the birthright, I don't get the impression, there's no evidence that she was serving the covenant. Okay?
She just wanted her son to be rich.
She wanted her son that was her favorite son. But more importantly, and this is what we didn't have time to get to, at this point, there's no evidence at all that Jacob himself cared anything about the covenant. None. Jacob wants the birthright. Jacob wants the blessing. Jacob wants the stuff. Jacob's not wrapped up. You can't point to anything that indicates Jacob's motivation was he was in service to or concerned about God's covenant with Abraham and Isaac. And that's going to come much more clear today as we go through today's scriptures and chapters. You're going to see that, and you're going to see that Jacob changes, and you're going to see how. And so I am comfortable with the idea that God saw who Jacob is. He understands the heart. And that should be comforting and encouraging for all. It is for me. I don't know about you. Maybe you, but for me, the idea, God sees who we are. He sees the heart and the character. And we're going to see that today. Watch for that as we go through today.
So we're starting to.
In the same fall, Esau said, you only have one blessing.
Yeah.
Something, what's the purpose of that line? And the purpose of that line comes to me is twofold. He decides who gets the blessing. And there may be a lot of blessings, but there's only one for you today.
That could be.
Or it could be multiple blessings as you go down the line and get you stronger, so like we're going to see to doing the right thing.
Let me suggest a possibility. And I'm not going to tell you, I try not to say I know what I don't know. But this blessing, and we sort of lost that, and we should really probably seek it. But think of it, what if it's in terms of, as you kind of said, the blessing comes from God. These kinds of blessings are a form of prophecy. They are speaking God's word. And Isaac didn't have anything for Esau at that point. Now, later, as I pointed out in that section, he finally delivers a word. He says, you're going to be subservient to your brother, but when the time comes, you'll cast off his yoke and you'll be your own man. So where did that knowledge come from? Where did that certainty come from other than God? And so this kind of blessing, I'm inclined to think it is functionally prophecy. It comes from God. So when he said, what Esau said is, don't you have a blessing for me too? Do you only have one? Well, as it turns out, he had one for Esau and apparently didn't know it until the words come out. So that's another thing maybe you can take for our own lives.
We're starting in Genesis 28, verse 10, and I'm going to give you a couple of, and this section is called Jacob's Ladder. And so, there's been songs written about Jacob's Ladder, and so anyhow, so some of you, even if it's not from a biblical standpoint, might have heard it. The other thing, I want to give you a spoiler alert to remember that Jacob now has, Rebecca wanted Jacob to get out of town because her husband's about to die, and Esau, the oldest son, says, as soon as my dad dies, then I'm going to kill my brother. Rebecca overhears this. Rebecca says, you need to get out of town, and he's going out of town. So the thought, and remember, Isaac believes that, everybody believes that Isaac can't see and he's old and he's about to die. So the thought is Jacob's going out of town so he won't get killed by his brother, but he's coming back soon. That's the thought process. Spoiler alert, it's going to be 14 years. Okay, so keep that in mind.
There is the idea that he's, the story is he's going out of town to get a bride from the old country, and that's part of it. But we know he's going out of town because Esau's going to kill him. Consider that by design, Jacob will not be back until after his dad dies, because they've been told, as soon as Isaac dies, Esau's going to kill him. So the plan here is for him to leave and not be there when his father dies. It's that kind of trip. And so, he's headed out thinking it may be 6 months till Esau calms down. And as Mary said, it's going to be 14 years.
Verse 10, meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. On reaching a certain place, he spent the night there because the sun had set. And taking one of the stones from that place, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. And Jacob had a dream about a ladder that rested on the earth with its top reaching up to heaven. And God's angels were going up and down the ladder. And there at the top, the Lord was standing and saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you now lie. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and east and north and south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised to do. When Jacob woke up, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was unaware of it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven.
So there's a whole bunch going on, and we're going to spend a lot of time on not too many verses today, because there's some things that I think are good for us to understand. And there's a tendency to read this and come up with it being almost a little bit flippant. First of all, it says he falls asleep. He picks up a stone. lays it down as a pillow. I'm sure it was flat, it was smooth, and no doubt he put his cloak or something over the top of it. You'll find out later why the stone is mentioned. But he has a dream. We're told it's a dream, and he pictures a ladder. Now, that word absolutely can mean staircase, for starters. Ladder would be sort of inconvenient. But he has this dream, this vision of God up above and angels ascending and descending this stairway. I am certain, actually, I know that God sometimes in these situations speaks to us in ways that we can understand, things that we can envision. We get that. And so, do I think there's a literal stairway and angels have to walk up and down a staircase? You know, God is at the top of it. No, I don't. This is a vision for Jacob. And you notice that God speaks to him and repeats the covenant promise that he gave multiple times to Abraham and multiple times to Isaac. You're going to be the father of a great nation. Your descendants will be like sand on the beach. And through you, through your descendants, now this is families, all nations, all families of the earth will be blessed. How is that even possible? I've said it before. This is prophecy of the Messiah and through your descendants. And that is their place in this world, is that through them, the coming of Messiah comes into being. And through that, everybody, no one excluded on earth, will be blessed. So Jacob doesn't have any real connection, apparently, to the covenant at this point. And after he sees this, he says, surely the Lord is in this place. I think at this point, his understanding is limited. He's like, oh man, the Lord is in this place. I never even knew it, right? And at this point, he's thinking it's the place he's in that's allowed him to do that. And so he says he became afraid. And that word is the same one in Genesis where God is walking in the garden and Adam hides from him. And God says, why are you hiding from me? He says, I was afraid. He knows, in Adam's case, he understands he's done wrong. And there is a feeling of awe, of reverence, of being in the presence of something much greater than himself. And it is the same exact word, as I said, that's used for Adam when God seeks him. And he said this one comment, how awesome is this place? And if you read it, it sounds like a surfer looking at some good waves. These are awesome waves.
And it was funny because when I was reading it, when we were studying, I misspoke and I said, how awful is this place? And Scott says, it says awesome. But then you realize, as Scott says, I mean, you're not.
I told you it was strangely appropriate.
Yeah.
Because the awe, that word awesome, comes from the same root as the word fear. It is exactly wound up in that same root. And so how awful literally means full of awe. That's true. That's what it is. And we get that multiple times through the scriptures of the great and terrible day of the Lord, or the great and awesome day of the Lord. That's one and the same. When it says fear the Lord, if you're wise, the idea that you're in the presence of God, who is so much more than you, a feeling of awe is appropriate and wise. And so he says, what an awesome place this is. And he says, this is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Now, his perception, we're limited by our perceptions, but his perception is it's the place. And he winds up, we're going to get to it, but he names it Bethel. Anytime you see Beth, it's Bet Bethlehem is Bethlehem. It's the city of, or the place of. Bethel means the city of God. Later on, before they build the temple, when they're still living in tents, they have the Ark of the Covenant. As they're constructing or about to construct the temple in Jerusalem, the Ark gets sent to Bethel. It's an important city, and it is treated as the city of God, just like Jerusalem gets treated as the city of God. Do you want to talk about this for a minute? We talked a lot about this week.
Yeah, about the place.
Yeah.
The place, well, two things I wanted to say. First of all, you have to realize that Jacob was raised by Isaac, who was a believer in Yahweh. And so Jacob had been taught about Yahweh. I think this whole Jacob's ladder thing, this dream, and he finally says, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was unaware of it. It is him owning his faith all of a sudden. You can be taught something, and then one day, then you believe it. But the thing we talked about is how this faith journey for Jacob or for you or for me is a journey, and it's not one and done. And it's, you have different stages of it. And if we all know people who says, I've done church, or I've been baptized and I'm fine. But, and I always think of my mom, aren't you done with this book? I hope none of us are ever done with this book. There's just always something else to learn. So first of all, I think he owned his faith here. But the second point was this idea of how awesome is this place, and that none other than the house of God, this is the gate of heaven. And don't we do that as believers? I mean, that's the church. We say offhand that, God is everywhere, but, God is more in the church building.
We're gonna go to the house of God. We're gonna go to a church as if the building is something different and special. And it's not. We are the church. There's a point where they're going to build. David actually wants to build the temple, but he's doing it from the perspective of, I'm going to build a house for God to live in. And God actually speaks to him, and he says, look, when you were nomads living in tents, I was with you. I don't require a house of cedar and stone. And I guess more to the point, what's being said, and that's not going to contain me. You're not building a house for me. Going to a church is to be together with the body, to be together with others and worship and learn. It's not for God's benefit, and it's not to pin him to a location. And I think most people I know have grown up being fed this idea that we're going to go to the house of the Lord, and somehow God will be more present there than he is the rest of the week. And it's just not the case. And so,
but he is not more present, but he also says numerous times, it's said numerous times in the body that as you gather together as a body. So
and one of the things that gets said is, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. It doesn't mean that
you can do God
you're going to come to a building and I'm going to be there. Assemble, get together. Do not give up assembling together with the others who follow and serve me. It's an important thing, but you see what Jacob is doing here. Jacob thinks, I tripped into a spot that just happens to be the place where the ladder comes down the stairway.
Well, God
and this
you.
is the gateway. This is the gateway to God. And Jacob will grow out of that given time.
Verse 18. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone that he had placed under his head, and he set it up as a pillar. He poured oil on top of it, and he called this place Bethel, though previously the city had been named Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and watch over me on this journey, and if he will provide me with the food to eat and the clothes to wear, so that I may return safely to my father's house. Then the Lord will be my God. And this stone I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give you a tenth.
So I wanted to save it back in verse 13 when God is speaking to him. He says, look, I am with you and I will watch over you wherever you go. And I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. This is the covenant. And just like Isaac has done, God is telling him, he's reminding him, this is your birthright, this place. I will bring you back here. Yeah, you're going to go away, but it's important for Jacob to come back to this place. And so now here's Jacob. He sets up the stone that he rested his head on. This is kind of a common occurrence for people in that time and place to set up these stones or mounds to commemorate something special. And so he uses that stone. But he says a funny thing. He's already said, this is the gateway to heaven, basically. I could get his words, but you get what he's saying. This place is where God comes down from heaven. And so he says, I believe there's a God and I believe this place. But he says, if God will do what he says and will take care of me and feed me and clothe me and then bring me back here, I'll be his servant and he'll be my God. I'll even give him a tenth. I'll give him a tithe. So he believes. This is that old saying, Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief, right? I believe, but I don't know.
But show me.
But show me. And it's, it would be better if we had such pure faith that we never feel any sort of doubt or question or distance. But here's Jacob. So Jacob is on this journey, the walk that Mary described, and it will increase as he grows. But he's already reached a point. He says, okay, I got this vision. If God really does that, I will serve him. And he also is now talking in terms of if he indeed brings me back here. This is important. This idea of coming back to this place is a big part. It's wrapped up in the covenant. It needs to happen in this place. There are prophecies later on that talk about where the Messiah will come from. Well, he comes from here. So it is sort of important that he gets back. And this is the picture I was trying to get you to earlier, that Jacob starts out one way. God works with him, even though he's pretty limited. And over time, he also grows, but it's because he seeks God and because he listens when God speaks.
Is there a meaning of the prior name of this one?
I couldn't find it. I tried. I mean,
For the Spanish and the Latin people, that didn't get it like.
yeah, and it's not in any. Not in any.
At all, because it needs something morally. This place, like, because now it's graduated. Now it is God's place.
The original name, I think, I couldn't find any meaning. The fact that he gives it a new name, I don't know. It's Mount McKinley or Denali. I mean, we do that. We give places new names, don't we?
And then take it back.
And so there's very much a meaning to him calling it Bethel, the city of God or the place of God. I couldn't find any meaning in Luke's. I tried. And there's a whole bunch of garbage to wade through. I had one other note. Mary, just remind me, do you have that reference?
Uh-huh.
So this idea of the covenant, there is within Judaism one of the most important scriptures is found in Deuteronomy. And they even have a name for it. It's called the Shema, right? And the Shema means listen, but it means listen and hear. I mean, listen really well. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen and hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And then there's some instructions. The Shema is this whole piece. But listen while Mary reads. And this is important because this is wrapped up in the covenant.
So I'm in Deuteronomy 6, and I'm reading verses 4 through 12. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These words I'm commanding you today are to be upon your hearts, and you shall teach them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as a reminder on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorposts of your houses and on your gates. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give you, a land with great and splendid cities that you did not build, with houses full of every good thing with which you did not fill them, with wells that you did not dig, and with vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. And when you eat and are satisfied, be careful not to forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
There's a reason why this is so important. And I don't like the translation. I don't know why so many people, Adonai Eloheinu, the Lord is our God, Adonai Echad, and it means Adonai one. And so they just translate it. It just says the Lord is one. Well, what does that even mean? The Lord is one. What does that mean? I don't know. The Lord alone. There are no other gods. The Adonai is our God, and actually it says Yahweh. It gets taken to Adonai, but Yahweh is our God. Yahweh alone. They get 10 commandments, right? Does anybody remember what the first commandment is? You shall have no other gods before me, right? This stuff begins to tie together in ways, but he says these words are so important. The Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You're going to speak of them to your children. You're going to teach them well. You're going to speak of them when you're on the road traveling. You're going to keep them in front of you. You're going to think them and say them when you go to bed at night and when you wake up in the morning. It's life-changing to keep in front of us these words, okay? And then he says, when the Lord brings you back to the land that he promised to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, here's the same covenant. Here's this same promise. Because remember, they've gone off to a place to avoid a famine and wind up staying, I don't know, 600 years or something. Oops, a little longer than we anticipated. But he was always going to bring them back. And when God brings you back to this place, take care to remember that it was him who brought you here, and it was him who brought you back. These are big, big words, and it is treated with great reverence in it to at least devout Jews. The Shema is a big, big deal. And you see the concept, you see the basics of it all the way back with Jacob. He says, yeah, you're going away, but I'm going to bring you back right here. And Jacob says, and when he does, I'll serve him.
And just to know that those words in Deuteronomy were, and we never looked at that, 400, 500 years later. Those words that we just read in Deuteronomy was after they came back from Israel. So it's way after Jacob has died, but it's part of, this story, as you always say, is consistent from day one.
There are certain themes that run all the way through all 66 books. They're always there. You learn to recognize them and you go, my gosh, this is what's important.
In this vow, it's contrary to the idea of faith.
Jacob's vow?
Jacob wants to prove it to me, and then I will follow.
But I would argue that it isn't contrary to
Let
faith.
him
Okay,
finish,
okay.
let
yeah.
him finish.
Well, that's the answer. You can't do that because to stay in faith, you can't be equal to God. You become God yourself then, and that's not going to happen.
That's
You have to survive and say, one.
But how many times do you do that? I mean, and I don't think, I think the point is, it's not contrary to faith. It is the faith walk. How many times do you say, I believe in God. Now, God, please fix, if you fix this situation, I'll really believe in you, you know, and, or I'll, you know, I'll pray more. I mean, believe me, in the last couple of years, I can tell you so many things I have tried to, you know, make a deal with God on.
It is not perfect faith. Let me give you that. It certainly is not. It
Right.
is not. And yet, that's why I keep coming back to that statement that, oh Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, is because this is the way we walk. And I say a lot, there are two kingdoms at play here. There are two things, and the stuff that we see and the stuff that we touch gives us doubt. And so it is a growth thing. And at least Jacob at this point is acknowledging, and he says, look, I believe this is the gateway to heaven. And he says, God says he's going to bring me back. And when he does that strike, you know, us as, well, that's not really faith when you say, only if you do this for me will I believe. But it certainly is a lesson for us. Do you not recognize it in yourself, in the world around you, that this is where we are? And the hope is that after paying attention to enough times where God is faithful, the next time we're faced with one of those things, we go, you know what? I was here before, and God is faithful. And maybe we don't drift as far afield as we did somewhere back along the line. That's the best answer I've got, but I think it's always easier to see things in other people than to see them in ourselves.
Genesis 29.
Gene's not done.
I'm sorry.
Let's hear it.
I agree with you. It's always easier to see what the neighbor is doing. But this, and we've been taught years and years and years of faith, 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 and it's undivided faith. Mary's point, I think, is brought down that it's a journey. You know, start out. Paul says you can't really see when you start. So you got to work on this idea until your time comes, and then you're before the Lord. But it's this idea way back here that negotiated with God. If you do this, I'll do that. We do that today. We do this, I'll do that. And I believe, but you're really not believing.
Well,
I want a reason. You can't have a reason. And
Well, I think the biggest thing you do, even if you have faith, you think you know the right answer. So you think you know how. So you're doing a prayer on how things should turn out right, because you know what right is. And I think the faith walk tells you eventually you don't know what right is. You know, I mean, you don't know how it's supposed to turn out, but you know, we're human to say, this is how I would like it to turn out, you know, but sometimes it doesn't, and God's got a plan.
I started out talking about things that attack people's faith. I run into people every single week because I do communicate with people. I run into people constantly who say, I refuse to believe in a God who would allow this to happen. I refuse to believe in a God who would let my grandmother die. When Mary's parents were, you know, really closely approaching that, I asked her, so how would it be okay? You want your mom to be 200, 300? Will there come a point where you'll say, okay, let her go, right? That's not our nature. I refuse to believe in a God who would do this. And we put those conditions on. And the purpose, if the purpose in this and in this study is to strengthen and to learn for ourselves, then this should be one of the lessons. At this point, Jacob is saying, if you do this, I'll worship you. If you do this, I'll follow you. If God does this, it's not ideal. It certainly is not. But we see later on, Jacob grows. This is how we grow. We don't grow all at once. We just don't. Yes.
I know there's some types of scripture where it's translated, but it would be split.
This is not one of those times. And you're right. There's sense. Yeah, she said that sometimes if in the scriptures could also be sense. And there are words like that in Hebrew where we have to have some wisdom about it. This is an if. And it literally says, it's not though necessarily saying I doubt it. He's just saying, I'm off. And if I come back here like he says, I'll have my confirmation. Maybe he requires that. I try to be careful about judging someone else's faith, measuring someone else's faith. I have a hard enough time with my own. And so to look at somebody thousands of years ago and say, well, he came up short. Okay, doke, you win. What about you? What about me?
Now we're going to go on to Jacob getting his wife. So chapter 29. Jacob resumed his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. He looked and he saw a well in the field, and near it lay 3 flocks of sheep, because his sheep were watered from this well, and a large stone covered the mouth of the well. When all the flocks had been gathered there, the shepherds would roll away the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. My brothers, Jacob asked the shepherds, where are you from? We are from Haran, they answered. Do you know Laban, the grandson of Nahor? Jacob asked. We know him, they replied. Is he well? Jacob inquired. Yes, they answered. And here comes his daughter Rachel with his sheep. Look, said Jacob, it is still broad daylight. It is not yet time to gather the livestock. Water the sheep and take them back to the pasture. But they replied, we cannot until all the flocks have been gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. As soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his mother's brother Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went up and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept out loud. He told Rachel that he was Rebekah's son, a relative of his father, and she ran and told her father. When Laban heard the news about his sister's son Jacob, he ran out to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home, where Jacob told him all that had happened.
Remember, he's here to find a wife. He's going looking for Laban, the relative, and he comes to a well, and we talk about how important these wells are. And they have built up stones around it, something I didn't think about, but you do have to protect from sand and everything getting blown in or it'll fill in. But they also protect the well because it's theirs. Nobody else can use it. And they put a big stone up.
Remember last week we talked about a bunch of wells that had been taken back by the Philistines. Yeah.
And so you protect it, and it's just mine, or just ours. And he comes up to these shepherds. The custom was they would bring their sheep in at the end of the day, water them, and gather them together so that they could protect them from wolves and lions and things like that, or from wandering off. This is the middle of the day, or at least, certainly not evening time. And these guys have already brought their flock to the well. They should probably be out there and have them grazing, right? I don't know if they're lazy. It seems like they're jumping the gun. We're just going to go hang out at the well and wait. And what happens is other shepherds bring their flocks and they move this big stone and we water the sheep. And he says, you know, Laban, oh yeah, we know him. Well, is he well? Yeah, he's well, that's good because that's the father of my new bride. And he says, as a matter of fact, here comes his daughter with his flock. And Jacob sees her, and we can speculate what's going on. I don't know. But he says to them, look, guys, it's still middle of the day. What are you hanging out here for? Water the sheep and get back out to the field, because that's where they graze. They don't go here next to the well. I'm sure they've eaten up everything. Get them back out there and do your job. Now, is he trying to get rid of them so he can be alone with Rachel? Maybe. I'd say maybe there's a good chance of that. And they said, no, we can't do that because the custom is everybody, all of us gather, and somebody's got to move the big heavy stone. And it's not my job, you know, or I can't. Rebecca comes, Jacob sees her, and he appears to be showing off. He moves the stone by himself, and then he waters Laban's flock for her. Remember when Isaac sent his servant to get a wife in the same area for Isaac? The servant looked for, he asked a girl for water, and if she says, let me also water your animals, he knows he's got a suitable wife.
That's how he found Rebecca.
That's how he found Rebecca. Someone who'll go the extra mile. This is the exact opposite of that. She comes and he says, come here, I'll water your animals for you. Now, if she's thinking in terms of finding a suitable husband, this is a pretty good endorsement. This is a good guy. He's not afraid to get in and get his hands dirty. It would appear to me he's showing off moving the stone by himself. Could be wrong, but these things happen. He explains, it says he kissed her, you know, he doesn't lay a big fat kiss on her. This is a custom in the place. You'll see later Laban.
We already said that.
Oh, you already said it. Yeah. Laban kisses him. They do the kiss on the side of the cheek, but it is this idea that they weep for joy. In that part of the world, they mourn when someone dies. They yell, they scream, they carry on. When you come across a long lost relative, I've seen scenes of people who were put up for adoption and later find their missing family, and they cry. This is the thing. And he explains who he is, and she takes off and runs to tell her dad. And Laban comes back and says, my uncle's son, and he takes him into his house. That's where the next part starts.
Then Laban declared, you are indeed my own flesh and blood. After Jacob had stayed with him a month, Laban said to him, just because you are my relative, should you work for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The elder was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Since Jacob loved Rachel, he answered, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban replied, better that I give her to you than to another. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Yet it seemed but a few days because of his love for her.
Let's stop there.
Okay.
So Laban, after he's been there a month, says, obviously Jacob's been working. He earns his keep. It's not fair for you to work for nothing. Tell me don't you hate that? Have you ever applied for a job and they say, how much do you think you're worth? I don't know. What do you think I'm worth? What do you want to pay me? Nobody wants to leave any money on the table. And we see this negotiation in the Middle East going on. I suspect that Jacob's eyes have been on Leah from the beginning, or on Rachel from the beginning. Laban must suspect. Maybe not. We don't know. He says, what do you think you're worth? And it talks about the 2 daughters. Leah's the older, and it says she had weak eyes. Nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows. I've researched it. There's all kinds of things.
A lot of
will
people
t-
have opinions.
a lot of people have opinions, and some will tell you they know exactly what it means. Nobody knows. I don't think it means that her eyesight was poor. It says Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was shapely and comely.
beautiful.
She was beautiful, right? The but in there says these two things are in contrast with each other. I think what it says is that she wasn't so pleasant to look at. She was weak to the eyes, right? That's what I think. We know that what's being said is Rachel's really attractive, Leah not so much. He's spotted Rachel from the beginning. He wants Rachel for a wife, and he says, I'll tell you what, I'll work for you. It's common to give a dowry to the family when when a wife is taken. So if you have the money, you offer.
Yeah.
We have a puppy that's sad because I'm talking, which probably a lot of you are too. But they offer money, they offer livestock, and it's not really a sale. Part of it is compensating the family for the loss of, having a worker, if you will, having someone that takes part in the chores.
And she was a shepherdess.
And she was a shepherdess. But if you're not bringing money, it's not unheard of that you sort of work for them. So he says, I'll work for you for 7 years for your daughter, Rachel, to be my wife. And Laban said this comment, and it brings to mind a really inappropriate joke, which I won't tell you, but I can't get out of my own mind. But he says, better I should give her to you than someone else. It's also not uncommon for cousins to marry. At that time, in that place, this is fairly common. The tribes are important. It's a known quantity. It's just not a big deal like it is to us. But better I should give her to you than to someone else. He says, we got a deal. Serve me 7 years, and I'll give her to you for a wife.
Finally, Jacob said to Laban, grant me my wife, for my time is complete, and I want to sleep with her. So Laban invited all the men of that place and prepared a feast. But when evening came, Laban took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and he slept with her. And Laban gave his servant girl Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her maidservant. When morning came, there was Leah. What
Can
did
we
he?
stop right there?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anybody who says the Old Testament is boring hasn't really read it, you guys.
I don't know how this happens exactly. I know that it's quite dark when you don't have street lights and electric bulbs and everything else. For starters, they have a big celebration.
And she would have been covered.
I suspect wine was involved, and she would have been covered. Okay. First of all, after 7 years, Jacob says to his father-in-law, it's time for you to give me my wife. I want to sleep with her. That's what it says. Okay. They're not squeamish about these things the way we tend to be. And so he says, fine. They have a big celebration. It's the night has gone over, and he sleeps with Leah. It says he goes to the tent, and no doubt it's really dark. And the next morning, there was Leah, and it's got an exclamation point. And it says exactly what you read here. It's exactly like, wait a minute, that's not Rachel. That's what's happened here. Is it possible? There are other stories in old literature of similar things happening.
But another deceitful act. I mean, there's like generations of deceit going on here.
One of the things you need to begin to see, Jacob gets in this situation through deceit, right? He deceives Isaac. He takes his brother's birthright, and then he takes the blessing through deceit. Now it's coming home to haunt him. Does this help Jacob grow? Does Jacob, you'd like to think that in the back of his mind, he's going, well, I've done that. Been there, done it. How mad can I get? He doesn't do what his brother Esau did and say, I'm killing Laban for this. I'm killing him. But he's not happy about it. He says, didn't I make a deal with you for Rachel? And I don't think you read it yet, but I can paraphrase it. Wasn't the deal that we had for Rachel? And he says, oh, yeah, but here we have a custom that it's not fitting for the younger daughter to be married before the old one is married. And I just did what had to be done. This is how things are done. This is what I was telling you back before. It's commonplace. It actually is a thing and has been a thing for the oldest daughter needs to be married before the younger one. And if you have an older daughter who is less desirable or has a bad personality, it's hard to get them married off. They begin to accept lower and lower standards for the kind of man and the size of the dowry that's necessary. This is well recorded. This happens. And so he says, yeah, sorry, nothing I could do about it. I mean, I wanted to, but I just couldn't because I got an older daughter.
I mean, when morning came, there was Leah. What have you done to me? Jacob said to Laban. Wasn't it for Rachel that I served you? Why have you deceived me? Laban replied, it is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older. Finish this week's celebration, and we will give you the younger one in return for another 7 years of work. And Jacob did just that. He finished the week's celebration, and Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave his servant girl Bilhah as his daughter Rachel's as her maidservant. Jacob slept with Rachel as well, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, so he worked for Laban another 7 years. I'll stop there.
First of all, this section, and we're not going to get any further into it today, is one of the most pathetic things I've ever read. I mean, he wants Rachel, he doesn't want Leah. And he says, why did you deceive me? He says, well, I didn't have a choice. He said, I'll tell you what. Go through this week-long celebration. This is the bride's week. And these celebrations last for 7 days. If you have the money, this is what you do. Even if you don't have the money, you do your best at this. This is her week. This is her honeymoon, if you will. And it would be sort of cruel to cut that short at this point. Just give her week. And then at the end of the week, I'll also give you Rachel for a wife in exchange for another 7 years of service. Now, apparently, he's giving Rachel on the installment plan. Jacob gets a second wife, with the understanding that he's going to work the deal out over the next 7 years. So Laban has gotten a really good worker for 14 years out of this. It's no accident. He didn't just suddenly discover my older daughter isn't married. Believe me, it's no accident. But he does. They give Leah her week. And then he sets him up with the second wife. That's also weird to us, but that's the way it is.
And we're going to stop here, but the other names to keep in mind. Remember, Laban gave a maid servant to Leah named Zilpah and gave a maid servant to Rachel named Bilhah. So in a week's time, Jacob now has 2 wives and 2 maidservants. So there's 4 women, probably 2 tents. And I mean, it's a mess.
He's starting his own clan.
Yeah.
I think Carol mentioned last week that it's still a custom that they can have multiple wives, but you have to have a house for each one. You have to support them. You can have up to 4. You got to draw the line somewhere, right? 5 would be wrong. 4 though we got. But this idea that Leah is painfully aware, and probably if we say she's not easy on the eyes, she's probably living. This becomes sad to me. It becomes very, very pathetic. She wants to be loved, And we're going to see next week, I mean, how this goes. And right after she has her bridal week, he gets the other wife. This is a sad thing. And you know, we're going to see some of what comes of that. We had Isaac and Rebecca, each with a favorite child. They're twins. Isaac loves Esau, and Rachel, and those things, you know, they cause problems. They
I
wind
did
up.
say to Scott today, this one, we were studying, can you imagine having like 2 wives and 2 maidservants? What a mess that would be.
The maidservants, if you're rich, then you're able to provide this, so your daughter is always taken care of. This is not a thing that poor people are able to do, and it's a sign of your wealth that you do this thing for her. But if you read ahead, look for Leah in this. I mean, it's still just. I just feel so badly for her through all of this. Anything else?
Yes, Luis is online and Austin on the phone, and just keep both Luis, but especially his mom in your prayers today. Specifically, it's the anniversary of when Luis's brother got killed. Okay, so keep them in your prayers.
God, we look for your wisdom, for your guidance. We know that our ways are not always your ways, and yet that's what we seek. We seek the understanding that life is better for us when we find your ways, that it takes on a life more abundant. And it's what we seek even when we're weak, even when we fail. And I'm grateful for the messages, the scriptures that you leave behind, that you inspire, that give us hope for ourselves, that give us examples that we can see ourselves and hopefully grow from it, hopefully not have to go through all of the same difficulties as the people we read about. I always ask that you remind us that we have a part, that you do work through us even in our brokenness, and you continue to call to us and to expect us to turn to you. Give us that reminder this week. Let us feel your presence and let us see your calls to us, ways that you reach out, turn us toward you. These ones that we've said these prayers for, we left Luis and his mother and the rest of the family out. You know how difficult those things are. We carry with us pain of loss. Be with them. Be with us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Hey, Terry, I would text Julie and just say, would this time work for you? I'm Lander, and yeah, and I'd love to hear back when you connect. Okay. You guys have a great day.
Have
See
a
you
great week.
later.
Of having a
Everybody,
Bye.
everybody, have a great day.
Having a